Hi there guys, my name's Matt, I'm an economics graduate and accountant, and today we're going to try and shed some light on the issue of whether a Big Four graduate scheme is the right route for you to go down after finishing uni. Now the way in which I'm going to try and explain this is with a sort of really simple mental graph with personality types ranging from super introverted to super extroverted on one axis and technical skill, i.e. mathsy type intelligence on the other. Now before we go any further, I think it's important to stress the fact that this is just sort of a way to simplify things and hopefully get these sort of ideas clearer in your own head. I know this sort of simplification of complicated issues is something that works well for me, so that's what we're trying to do in this instance. I'm happy to admit that there is probably much more nuance that plays a part in these sort of decisions, but for the purposes of this video we're going to focus on this 2x2 sort of matrix. Okay, so now we've got the axis of this graph set up, and the first and most important stage is going to be for you or for I to think, okay, where would I plot myself on this graph if I'm being perfectly honest? Where do I think I fall? Am I super sharp but really shy, or do I sort of baffle people with my chat when actually I don't have the technical knowledge, the technical foundations to actually back up what I'm saying? I try and pull the wool over people's eyes. Rightly or wrongly, I think a lot of people do like to, internally anyway, identify with a particular set of personality or intelligence type characteristics, and that's the sort of role that they cast for themselves for the majority of their life. So on that basis, working out whereabouts you think you might fall on this matrix should hopefully be relatively doable. So what does all of this actually mean? Well, in my opinion, the majority, not all, but the majority of people doing Big Four audit, in my experience, are on the introverted half of our matrix rather than in the more extroverted half. And in fact, I think we can narrow it down even further. I think we'd say up in this top left quadrant where the high level of technical skill meets that slightly more introverted personality type. Because of the workload, because of the steep learning curve, because of the exams, being able to pick up these new topics quickly, having that mathsy type brain is probably almost a prerequisite for a role like this. So if you're sort of self-identifying anywhere in the bottom half of this matrix that we're talking about based on the intelligence spectrum, then it's possibly worth considering whether a role like this is really for you. I'm not saying the work is impossibly difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible to succeed if you are somebody that probably puts yourself in that bottom half. Just saying it's probably tougher than if you sort of self-identify as, yeah, I know I'm an absolute whiz and so what. So then we come back to this question of left versus right. And as I said, I think on balance, the majority of people, not everyone, but the majority of people I've worked with whilst in Big Four audit, I would probably place them on the left-hand side of this matrix. Some way onto the left-hand side, some only just the other side of the dividing line. But on balance, I think that's a fair assessment to say the majority probably demonstrate slightly more introverted personality types. Just because that's where the majority of the staff base tend to sit, does that mean if you find yourself in the right half, the job is not for you, and if you're in the left half, it is? I don't think it's quite that simple. I don't know if this is a controversial point of view or not, but in my opinion, I think the sort of best, most sought after graduate candidates are those that probably sit up in the top right corner of this spectrum. The top banks are going to want people obviously that are switched on, obviously that are clever, but they also probably want that slightly extra level of chattiness, confidence, people skills, whatever we want to call it. It's probably more sought after to be over there than it is to be slightly more shy and quiet. Personally, if I could build myself like a character in a PlayStation game with the mission being get the best possible grad job, I would say I want full intelligence and full chattiness. There's also an argument that Big Four grad schemes aren't the absolute holy grail when it comes to where people want to work straight out of uni. There's the top investment banks, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, that possibly is where these people that know they've got the skill set to go wherever they like, they're possibly applying to these banks instead. And I think this leads us full circle back to the possible oversimplification of this approach. It's obviously not quite fair to say there are good and bad candidates for every role, because each role will require different skill sets, whether it's audit or banking or whatever. By its very definition, audit is very detail oriented and involves long hours of scrutinizing financial data with a fine tooth comb. So possibly being overly chatty, overly salesman-like in your manner won't actually stand you in good stead for that sort of work. So I do think it's sort of a combination of factors, both the specific requirements of what a role in audit actually involves, and also the dynamics of the wider graduate job market in terms of the banks and everything else that's going on, consulting firms, that means that it lends itself to this slight bias towards people working in Big Four if they come from this top left quadrant that we've been talking about. All of that said, is there any reason why a high flyer with lots to say couldn't do really well in an audit role? Absolutely not. But I do think that person might be slightly bored by the nature of the work, especially in the first few years before they get to a level of seniority whereby the interpersonal skills are likely to be more beneficial and of more relevance in terms of having those slightly higher level conversations with clients or potential clients at pitches. There's no doubt these skills definitely do become more valuable as you progress through the firm and you're responsible for managing your own team. It's just a case of on the graduate scheme itself in those first few years where you're at the bottom of the ladder. So there you have it, guys. That's my two penneth on the subject of personality types in the world of Big Four graduate schemes. I sincerely hope nobody's been offended by any possible oversimplifications or any nuances that I've missed out through this discussion. It's just to try and give people an idea of some thoughts that they may or may not like to consider when it comes to applying to their role straight out of uni. If you enjoyed this video and you would like to hear more of my ramblings about life at the Big Four, then please do check out the video linked up here, whereby I try to uncover some of the truths about what it's like day to day doing one of these graduate schemes. I'll hopefully see you in that one in just a second, but either way, have a great rest of the day, stay safe, and bye bye.